Hello and welcome to today's 10 at 10. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Holleran and I work in practice support in OmniPro. I'm joined on today's 10 at 10 by my colleague Colm Owens, who's going to address some of the practical issues that are being encountered by accountants following COVID-19. I suppose when COVID-19 came out initially, AML probably wasn't the first thought on everyone's minds when it comes to all things related to accountancy, but there are a few practical issues that have kind of emerged over the past couple of weeks that Colm is going to take us through. So I suppose I'll hand you over to Colm. I think Colm, you have control of the screen. So if you want to,
yeah. Thanks, Mike. Yeah,
there.
I think you're dead right. I think up until now we've all been dealing with practical issues, real life issues like the wages subsidy scheme. You've done a very good webinar on financial reporting, audit issues. So those have been really the kind of current issues and the issues that people have been dealing with. We've just in terms of AML, it's always there. It'll always be there, I think. And these are just highlighting a couple of the more practical issues that kind of have arisen or that will arise due to COVID-19. It's all really around, I think, the whole lockdown and the whole the very social distancing and the lack of actually meeting up with people. And these in themselves cause issues for society in general, but I think more so from a point of view of AML, these are the practical issues. So I just hopefully we can share my screen there now. Here we go. Oops. Yeah. So really just I've just identified four key issues. There's probably a lot more out there in terms of AML, but I find that these probably are going to be the four key issues that the firms are going to come up against in terms of COVID-19. Obviously, the first one is your client risk assessments. So an integral part of any AML procedures are customer due diligence and your risk assessment. So how does COVID-19, how does the lack of meeting your clients or your prospective clients impact on your client risk assessment? And coming down to that, after that, obviously is the next stage is your verification of IDs. So we're all working remote. The MLRO is probably in a different room, potentially even a different county to most of the other people in the firm. So how are you dealing with kind of verification of client IDs, timings of customer due diligence? So really is in terms of when do you do your customer due diligence? Can you get away with delaying it really? Because obviously we're in a lockdown. And then issue 4, reporting. Reporting kind of really ties in with all the rest in terms of access to people. And really that's all this is about, is access to clients or prospective clients and access to staff members who are doing it, or access to your MLRO, So in terms of the first issue, so this is probably obvious, but like obviously with the travel and the other restrictions in place, actually personal and face-to-face interactions, the inability or to actually meet your client is going to have an impact on performing your effective customer due diligence. So in normal times we would hopefully meet the client face to face, and we will talk to them. Obviously, with the lack of face to face interaction, that in itself is going to cause problems. Just obviously to remind that good customer due diligence is a 3-stage process, as we all know. So we got client identification first, which is gathering your information, your risk assessment then, and then your verification, which is your evidence gathering. So I think these are just to flag these issues to firms, and like obviously the inability to meet a client face to face is going to impact on the firm's ability to conduct an effective risk assessment. But then by not carrying out an effective risk assessment, this in turn I think should lead to increased caution out there generally, in terms of taking on new clients. you know, I'm sure there are unscrupulous people out there who will try and use the whole COVID-19 situation as a way to make some kind of gain, and potentially this could be an area where, you know, firms are taking on new clients without performing the normal, inverted commas, robust customer due diligence and risk assessments. Mike, do you have any kind of insights into that, or?
No, but I suppose it does present a real challenge. I mean, obviously, you know, meeting your clients face to face is what's in the legislation. So, I mean, it is a bit of a challenge, because obviously, if you're in the process of taking on a new client and that link is missing, you know, I suppose it would raise the question, you know, can alternative measures be used, such as a Zoom call, such as, you know, a call holding up your passport to the screen. Now, I haven't seen any guidance from the regulatory bodies about, you know, what's appropriate or what's not appropriate, but it does present a huge challenge. On the whole area of COVID-19, I suppose, you know, there's always, when something like this is ongoing, there's always going to be someone who'll try and win from a financial point of view. And, you know, I think we've seen a couple of scams that have been reported on. I don't know, there was a text message one about, you know, you've been identified as someone who's been in contact with COVID-19, please click this link, and I think that brought you to kind of something that you had to pay for or something like that. But, you know, something like COVID-19 does present additional opportunities for fraudsters, and it's just, you know, to be aware of the potential for that.
Yeah, and I think the last point, like, you know, especially in this situation, you know, a period of uncertainty relating to COVID-19, I think, irrespective of what we're saying here, I think, you know, firms should be more cautious in terms of their AML procedures and carrying out risk assessments. So they may, you know, just under the period of COVID-19, they may need to consider, you know, whether or not the whole uncertainty, the inability to meet a client to verify ID, does that then result in a different level of customer due diligence that needs to be carried out? So we're all familiar with the normal standard customer due diligence. You know, we're all familiar with enhanced customer due diligence. Is COVID-19 a situation where, you know, in the short term, you might be looking to carry out more enhanced type of customer due diligence just to get you over the hump of not actually meeting people face to face, or even if you're doing a Zoom call, like the way, you know, we're doing a Zoom call, whereas you can link that in to getting, you know, getting certified IDs, which is now going to be another point that kind of I'm probably going to come onto that as well. So just firms need to be aware that this is an issue. It potentially could be an issue, and it will impact on their risk assessments. And obviously, coming from both ourselves, coming from a previous role as reviewers, again, you know, AML and complying with your policy procedures, and being able to, you know, are your procedures robust enough that you're able to tweak them to account for something like this, needs to be borne in mind. And the next issue then would be, you know, then the next step obviously is verifying the IDs. So, you know, another potentially challenging area is actually verifying if a client is unable to produce certified copies of their passport and driver's license. So, and you know, that, you know, normally a client would come into your office potentially, or you would meet them. They would give you a copy of their IDs. You would take a copy of it, and you'd note it as being a certified copy of the original. But how are you dealing with that now when there's no one to do that? Because we're all working remotely. There is no office really. So how are you getting around the ability to certify the copies of the IDs? And then, like, obviously, you know, the important thing to note is basically is that, you know, you need to ensure that the evidence that you're obtaining, the way you're verifying your IDs, is from a reliable source, and it's an independent, reliable source of the person who you're actually trying to verify. which is going to be a problem. Even sorry, go on.
No, I suppose, that's a very hard thing to do. I mean, unless you live within, I don't know, 2 kilometers of a Garda station and you can walk down and get a photocopy and get them to sign it and certify it and post it back. It's going to be very hard to achieve that, because if you can't go within 2 kilometers of your house, it's very hard to expect a client to be able to produce that. So again, it's just, I suppose, all about, well, can you do something else, or can you achieve that by other means?
Very much so. And I think like the third point here about how firms will demonstrate the provenance, fancy word, of the document copies. That will become a fair, an issue, I would say, on AML monitoring visits, because obviously, those visits will still be being carried out. Firms are still hopefully taking on new clients, especially if the lockdown, we're already into week 1 of a 3-week extension. So whether or not this will be the lockdown will be extended, or there'll be different type of social distancing practices. Firms now need to consider, well, how are we going to demonstrate that we've complied with our AML requirements, in terms of, first off, in terms of meeting the client face to face, and then in terms of verifying the IDs. Obviously, the last point is fairly obvious. Certified copies are reliable, and obviously once you're happy that with the standing of the certifiers, as you said, the guards, solicitors, various things like that. It's the issue now of non-certified copies. So if someone's sending something into you, via email or whatever, and it's a new client, how are you happy that this is the person who you're saying? I think firms need to very similar to say the audit sphere, where firms are now looking at alternative audit procedures. Firms may be looking at should we looking at alternative procedures, or alternative ways of getting evidence to verify the client's ID. And then in terms of considering whether or not access to official source documents. So a certain of incorporation for a company, or company register, or various things like that. As you pointed out there, Mike, I'm sure there's people out there who will use the COVID-19 situation as a way to conduct fraud. So it's just a consideration for firms to be aware that, like, this is out there.
I think the National Crime Agency in the UK, I briefly read a document of theirs in the last week, but I think they have noticed a spike in suspicious activity reports arising out of scams related to COVID-19. So I suppose, just to let you know, these scams are happening. They're not, and I suppose it's just to be aware that that they could be happening with clients of yours. Exactly.
Yeah. Then the third issue, obviously, is timing of CDD. Now, where this comes about is obviously because we're all, as I said at the beginning, we're all remotely working. We're all social distancing. So the question basically is, well, look, can you defer your normal customer due diligence if your MLRO or if your person responsible is self-isolated, or even on a simple practicality, if they're remote working? So the AML legislation, it does state that it should be done before entering into a business relationship, but that is straight off. But it does recognise there is a facility in there. There is recognised that the CDD will occasionally need to be completed while the business relationship is established. I doubt they had a COVID-19 situation in mind when they drafted the legislation, but this is possibly one of the areas where you would be relying, you know, on that area of the legislation, whereas, you know, you possibly might be able to totally complete your CDD before entering into your business relationship. So you may need to do it, you know, on a you know, throughout the process. But you need to bear in mind that, like, you know, delays in doing your customer due diligence should only be allowed where there's a little risk of money laundering. So this goes back to, because it's kind of like a chicken and egg. So this goes back to your risk assessment. So, you know, if you've risk assessed your potential new client as, you know, low risk, well then potentially your customer due diligence can be delayed. But going back to our initial points, if you can't meet the client face to face, you can't verify the documents. Your risk assessment, you should be using caution in terms of doing your risk assessments, which basically means you might be looking at doing more enhanced customer due diligence. So you're just it's all these areas need to be just borne in mind.
And just, I suppose, on the third bullet point, I mean, the guys that you'd be kind of maybe might present a higher level of risk that you mightn't be willing to facilitate. You might be looking at, you know, people with aggressive tax policies, high profile cash businesses, people wanting to use a client account if the firm has a client account, those types of ones. Whereas you could possibly categorize your lower risk ones and say, okay, well, there's a potential that we could facilitate them in this circumstance.
Yeah, very much so. I think, and I think you know, it doesn't, like, you know, by delaying or by delaying your customer due diligence, you know, it doesn't, it's the firm still needs to gather the information. So it still needs to get, you know, a general understanding of the client's identity, so that it remains possible to assess the risk of money laundering. So it doesn't mean you just don't do anything and you do it later on. You should still be doing some kind of your customer due diligence. You may not be able to finalize it, but, you know, you're building up your knowledge of your clients. You're building up the profile. You're doing your risk assessment as much as you can, and then, you know, hopefully when we do come out of the lockdown and we are able to meet all our new clients, well then your CDD can be finalized and you can go on as normal. But, you know, just, you know, the important point to make is basically is, if you haven't completed your customer due diligence, you shouldn't be doing anything for the client in terms of, you know, finalizing anything. Especially you shouldn't be doing, as you mentioned there, Mike, you know, in terms of using client monies or assets or anything like that. So if a client is looking to use your client monies account, you know, but that potentially that could flag an issue. You know, the potentially starting the client engagement, fair enough, but, you know, you wouldn't be finalizing anything until you have, you know, completed your customer due diligence and you're happy with the bona fides of the client. And then just to bear in mind, like, you know, if the person responsible isn't self-isolating or anything like that, and it is just you know, remote working, you know, the responsibility is still there to do your proper checks and still do your appropriate CDD, bearing in mind the first two issues of the you know, verifying the ID and actually meeting your clients. And I think really then the last point really is just to kind of go through kind of like, you know, reporting issues. I know, Mike, you've a fair bit of knowledge on this in terms of you know the issues over internal and external reporting. I think I see where the issue would be internally would be because people are remotely working, is getting access to the MLRO, is actually getting the reports, potentially getting the internal reports to the MLRO in good time. You know, I think that's something that, you know, that needs to be borne in mind especially where we are all remote working or working from home, or self-isolating, or various things like that.
Yeah, that's going to present a challenge, all right. Obviously, if your money laundering reporting officer is self-isolating or off for a period of time, the issue will be, well, who do you report to? Is there a deputy MLRO in place, or do you wait for the MLRO to come back? So again, I suppose there is possibly going to be a timing issue. Now, you're probably talking weeks, which, in the grand scheme of things, is that going to be a huge issue, considering the situations we're in? But I suppose you still are required to make your reports on at the earliest possible opportunity. So you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and then obviously following on from that, like if you have had the facility to still accept the internal reports, your obligation is still there to make your external reports to revenue. There's been nothing's been flagged to say that has ceased or anything like that. So just to bear in mind that even though we're under a COVID-19 situation, the responsibility is still there to make your external reports under Go AML and to revenue, on a timely basis, in line with legislation, and nothing really has changed there, and COVID-19 hasn't really impacted on that in terms of.
And I suppose on the two external reports, I mean, it's worth pointing out too that Go AML is an online portal. So obviously, provided you've all the necessary access at home, that'll be fine. Revenue, it's sent in by post. So obviously there might be a timing issue that if you can't get to the post office due to self-isolation or due to the 2 kilometer limit, that might be delayed. Although I suppose you could argue that it's essential services, services of an accountant.
Well, look, like that's really it. Like there wasn't particularly much in it in today's 10 and 10. But us at OmniPro brought this today because obviously it's just to bear in mind there are AML considerations to still be considered, even though we're under COVID-19. I don't think I have any other closing remarks. Just to bear in mind the issues that we've spoken about. Hopefully they won't cause too many problems to firms, because their policy procedures should be robust enough to deal with it. But just to bear in mind that like these are the kind of the issues that are coming up, mainly to do with where we are in terms of lockdown and access to people more so than anything else, and staff members.
Yeah, that's great, Colin. Thanks for that. I suppose that's all for today's 10 at 10. I'd like to thank Colin for his insight into these issues. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a great weekend and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good, Mike.